You're about to watch a clip from the Videomaker Podcast. If you want to see the whole episode, click the link in the description. So if we sort of pivot to kind of your trademark look, you know, I always think of Casey Neistat's look as, you know, a combination of these gorgeous, you know, time-lapse shots or, you know, aerial drone footage, and also like Sharpies and whiteout, right? Like handwritten graphics, and, you know, you're doing your lower thirds or whatever it is, your graphics written on a card or a piece of paper, and your personal handwriting comes through as part of that style. So it's a very unique signature look that you have. Can you tell us a little bit about like what was the process of creating that look? Was it deliberate, or did it sort of happen organically to make that?
No, this is, you know, for me, like finding that aesthetic and that sort of tone that I think has definitely had some role in all of the videos that I've ever made. It was sort of a process of not knowing the correct way or the typical way of I'm plugging in my computer here, of filmmaking or storytelling. And in the absence of knowing how to do it in a more formal way, my brother Van and I, in the early days, like when we were making our HBO show and even before that, we would just sort of look around and say, what tools do we have at our disposal? We know we'd have some sort of story, but we're like, we have all these holes in it. How do we fill those holes in? And it's like, well, let's just draw a quick animation to explain that. And it's like, cool. And it's like, well, let me just show this to sort of fill that gap in a way that thematically makes sense. And, you know, when I think of the time lapses or like some of the stuff, the techniques that I use in so much of the vlog, I think of that similarly. Like I needed a way of bridging scenes. I needed a way of setting the tone and setting the environment. And something like a time lapse, especially in 2015, that's like a really cheap, what's it like cost per value equation there. Like I just set my camera down, click record for 4 minutes and pick my camera up, and people would be like, wow, this guy is like a virtuoso cinematographer. And it's like, whoa, no. I literally just put the camera down. And I think it's because as long as the picture was beautiful, you know, it had an impact on people. So, you know, all of those techniques that sort of have defined the signature or the look that is synonymous with my work, it was just like needing to fill a gap. iMovie 1.0, back in the day, before we had Premiere, before I had Rush on my phone, you had like one font choice. So if you wanted to do a title, it was like some terrible title with a terrible animation, and that was it. So it's like, okay, I don't want to do that title. What can I do? And then you get out a pen and a paper and you just film the paper. So again, it was like there was a hole in the process, and we just sort of filled it with whatever kind of tools we could come up with, whatever kind of devices we could come up with.
You know, it seems like what often happens with this kind of thing is, you know, when something is done production wise with like the low production value version of this, like the hand-drawn titles, it either comes across as like intentionally what it is, and it comes off as good, which is I think what your stuff comes off as, or it just like falls flat, right? Like, oh, that's amateurish. And, you know, I think you could probably tie, you know, if we were trying to figure out why does Casey Neistat stuff work, you know, it's handwritten stuff. Like the handwriting is like, it's legible, but it's like intentionally kind of like normal handwriting. It's not like perfect handwriting or whatever. And, you know, we're thinking about, well, it might be the you know, how tight all the editing is or how clear the story is that sort of, you know, piecing these two things together says, okay, well, this is an intentional look and it sells because of that. Or maybe it's a few years of sort of the YouTube aesthetic catching on and people becoming accustomed to things like handheld shots and the reversed, you know, selfie mode shot or something. But I don't know. Do you have any insight into that, or when you started, did it feel as good as it feels now?
You know, it's tough to think of it in that context. I think for what excites me is this idea that like so much of what we see is perfect. What we see on television is perfect. whether the lighting in like a morning talk show or a sitcom, it's flawless. Kids' cartoons aren't hand-drawn anymore. It's all computer generated, and it has this look of just perfection. And with all of that technical perfection, you sort of lose sight of the human hand. You know, like I'm really upset about Thomas the Tank Engine, because when my older son is 22 now, when he was a baby, Thomas the Tank Engine was all stop frame, animated, shot with real cameras, with real hardware, with a train that actually existed, with like really beautiful voiceover about beautiful ideas. And now it's this sort of CGI, plastic, garbage, uninspired pile of mush. And when you watch the old ones, you can imagine a human being moving that little train, and you know that it existed. And you look at the new ones, and it's just like, wow, like some AI spit this thing out. What am I looking at? So with my own work, I always find that like there's a threshold where like, yes, the software, the hardware I use, I can make everything flawless. I can color correct the nines. I can make it look like, I can make it look like a Hollywood movie using this technology. But there's a price for that. And I think the cost of that is losing that human hand. Like, no, I'd rather have it be a little bit fucked up, because then you trust that it's just me doing it. If the shot's perfect every time, there's no way you can preserve spontaneity. And to me, spontaneity does this much for a story. And having like razor sharp focus 100% does like this much, when you're watching a YouTube blog. So yeah, I like to leave the scars in there. I like to leave the mess ups in there. I like the audience to know that like it really is just me sitting in front of my computer editing all night, making this. And it sort of goes hand in hand with like my single favorite compliment is when somebody sees anything I've ever made and they're like, I think I could make that. Because I know when I was a kid watching like, the Spike Jones, Michel Gondry, looking at Wes Anderson's early work, it's like, that's incredible. And I want to make that. So the idea that people are able to say that and see my work as accessible, that's a part of it too.